Hi.
Hello. The last segment we were talking about the tests that Nebuchadnezzar put to his entire court of wise men, including, of course, Daniel and the three young men. Anyone of you who can tell me my dream and give me its official interpretation. And he gets so frustrated with the wise men of Babylon who say it's impossible. We'll give you the interpretation, but we won't give you the dream itself. Nobody could do that. He's so desperate that he says, destroy them all. I guess he's going to make a new batch of wise men. But before that happens, Daniel intercedes to save both himself and his friends, but also the wise men of Babylon.
Yes.
And we did the first 30 verses of the chapter, so we won't retrace that. And now we're thinking through the last segment of the chapter, the last 1/3 of it, where, first of all, in verses 31 to 35, Daniel gives the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, past test number 1. Then he gives the interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar. And let's see how both Daniel sums it up and how Nebuchadnezzar responds to it.
Right. Okay, so we're going to read chapter 2 from 45b right through to the end of the chapter. The grand God himself has made known to the king what is to occur after this. And the dream is reliable, and the interpretation of it is trustworthy. At that time, King Nebuchadnezzar himself fell down upon his face, and to Daniel he paid homage. And he said to offer even a present and incense to him. The king was answering Daniel and saying, truly, the God of you men is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, because you were able to reveal this secret. Consequently, the king made Daniel someone great, and many big gifts he gave to him, and he made him the ruler over all the jurisdictional district of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel, for his part, made a request of the king, and he appointed over the administration of the jurisdictional district of Babylon Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Daniel was in the court of the king. End of chapter 2.
So I suppose the first thing we should remark is the political advancement of both Daniel and the three. The one point easy to overlook is, well, we know Daniel receives advancement and accepts it.
Yes.
And he requests, apparently, a specific job for the three companions.
Yeah, so I didn't really notice that the last time, that it was his suggestion that his friends be given political position. So they don't view it the same way as we did as Jehovah's Witnesses, as somehow a compromise if you are involved in politics. Worldliness. But here, it's not just because they're captives in the land. He's taking these as an opportunity, as an opportunity for good.
Yeah.
This is the way he views it.
So looking at the world as a challenge rather than as a threat. I'm taking God to the world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Christians have the same issue, it seems to me. They're working through themselves.
Yeah.
Where does worldliness become worldliness? Is it being in the world? Well, as we said back in the first video in the Daniel series, you can be in the world but not of it.
Yeah.
That seems to be the attitude of both Joseph and Moses and Daniel.
Viewing it as somehow it protects the person if they're not involved. Right? We see that even with homeschooling. A lot of people think you go into homeschooling strictly to kind of prevent your children from being with worldly people or in the world and contaminated. Really, it should be to better, like to add, not to subtract, but to add.
Yes.
To their ability.
To make them salt and light.
Right.
Wherever they are.
Yeah.
Not easy to do.
And that is possible even when you're homeschooling.
Sure. So when you look back over this, you realize there's something else here that you might not notice, which is what Nebuchadnezzar does right away after Daniel finishes his proof of inspiration. Falls down in front of him. The most powerful man in the world throws himself down at Daniel's feet. Well, I guess he's proven something. It can be done, despite what the wise men of Babylon said. So
and he does praise Daniel's God, but you would still think that Daniel, maybe he did feel uncomfortable when that happened, but he doesn't object. He doesn't say, oh, get up, stop, don't do that.
Unlike Peter in the New Testament.
So, people react differently to things, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're compromisers.
No, but in Nebuchadnezzar's comments, you can see Daniel knows Nebuchadnezzar by now, and he, in the comments, reveals he's not bowing down to him because he thinks he's God. He's bowing down to him not because he's worshiping him, but he's showing reverence to Daniel to show reverence to the God of Daniel.
He's recognizing the God that Daniel serves, and he calls him a revealer of secrets.
Yes, so
that's why he knows Daniel is sent by God, because he's been able to tell him something that only the king knew.
So we made the point in one of the titles in the prior video that Daniel is a witness to the true God for sure, but he's not a witness to the tetragram. But he's showing the character and the omniscience and the omnipotence of the true God.
He's presenting a very great God, a big God.
Now the contrast with the Watchtower is pretty marked here. When we wanted to develop that more. What is the Watchtower claiming when it makes its claims to be the only organization God is using? Then is it showing any of the signs and proofs that Daniel, the prophet of God, the true prophet of God, shows and is willing to show to gain his credentials and his status in Babylon? So what are the two tests? Well, inspiration, that would be inspired revelation, and inspired interpretation. Does the Watchtower make either of these claims? To be inspired in the sense of accepting revelation from God? They don't claim that.
No, they don't.
Do they claim to be inspired interpreters? Apparently not. In recent years, they've admitted they're fallible there too.
And yet at the same time as saying that, or confessing that they're not inspired and that they're still searching and learning, they want you to treat them as if they're infallible, because they're asking for your loyalty to them, unquestioning loyalty. And if you don't give them that, they have authority in your life because they can throw you out. And for all people say, well, you can choose to leave and nobody's keeping you. They're taking your family. They're taking all your friends. That's a big foot on your neck. Don't say you have freedom.
So what we're contrasting then is the claim of the Watchtower, which when you look at it that way is even bigger than the claim of the prophets of the Old Testament. Daniel is not an organization. The three young men and Daniel don't form Jehovah's organization. The organization is Babylon, babylon.org. They're serving that organization, but they're in it but not of it. It's not God's pure organization, but they're serving it, and they're willing to do that. The Watchtower claims that you must be totally separated from the unclean thing to have God's blessing, and yet they show none of the characteristics of God's omniscience and omnipotence that Daniel is willing to display.
When we talked about it, we said really what they're asking is more than what prophets ask for. It's even more than what Jesus asked for, because Jesus says that you can say something against me, but not the Holy Spirit.
You can speak against the Son of Man, but to blaspheme the Holy Spirit is an unforgivable sin. So in effect, the Watchtower has put itself in the place of the Holy Spirit.
Because you can't criticize them. If you're not infallible and you're not inspired to say things from God, and you can't interpret them infallibly, why should it be called apostasy if somebody criticizes you? They're not rejecting God. They're not rejecting Jesus. They're rejecting you as having authority.
So their claim is a bigger claim not only than the prophets, who did demonstrate God's omniscience and often his omnipotence as well by miracles,
Right.
but it's a bigger claim than Jesus Christ.
Wow.
So in the next segment we'll be discussing the things the Watchtower itself has said in the very decade that the scandal of 1975 broke. What did the Watchtower itself say about what was demonstrated in Daniel chapter 2?